Okay, time for another one of those critical top 5 lectures in the whole course. We're going to introduce DAX measures, which is the second place to use data analysis expressions. Now, simply put, measures are DAX formulas that you can use to create dynamic values within a pivot table. Now, like calculated columns and like any place you'd use DAX, measures reference entire tables or columns. So again, no A1 style references. But here's the thing, unlike calculated columns, the measures don't actually live in the table. Instead, you place them in the values area and only the values area of a pivot table so that they can dynamically calculate in each individual cell. This works in a very similar way to calculated fields in a traditional pivot table. Now, here's the most important concept, is that measures are evaluated based on the filter context of each cell in a pivot. And that filter context is determined by the pivot table layout. So your filters, your slicers, any row labels, any column labels, all of those elements of your pivot table layout create something called a filter context, or a set of filters that determine what value that measure is going to return. Again, this is a similar concept to how you would work with traditional calculated fields. Now, the important thing to remember is that calculated columns work with row context, measures work with filter context. And this is a concept that can get a bit nuanced, but it's critical to really understand it as we start diving into writing DAX measures. So, important box here, rule of thumb, you're going to use measures, not calculated columns, when a single row can't give you the answer. In other words, for fields that require some sort of aggregation. And again, measures can only be placed in the values area of a pivot table. So, pro tip here, use measures when you want to create some sort of values that users can explore within a pivot. So again, it's like the power pivot version of a calculated field. Now, there are a few different variations of measures and a few places where you can define them. So we're going to dive into each of those in the upcoming videos.